Hello friends, welcome to the platform for Inspired Learners. My name is Dr. Mohammed, I'm your host. Today we are honored to have Brother Emmanuel will be presenting something to do with religion as a teleological suspension of ethics, reflections from a melancholic. Now, who is a melancholic? What does he mean by religion? What are teleological underpinnings that he says? So, direct to the presenter, without wasting time, I'm going to welcome Brother Emmanuel, Kashumba, with the presentation. Bro, you're welcome.
Thank you, my brother. I am Emmanuel Kashumba. I am a student of life. So today's topic, as touched on by the host, Brother Datius, is religion as a teleological suspension of ethics. Reflections from a melancholic. Now, as you have heard, the title has two parts. Religion as a teleological suspension of ethics, and reflections from a melancholic. The first part is the core of today's discussion, and the latter part is simply an identifier of where the ideas come from. So let's begin, first of all, with identify, I guess, then we'll move on to the main part. Reflections from a melancholic. The melancholic talked about here is SOREN Kierkegaard, a 19th century Danish philosopher, known by some thinkers as a major pioneering philosopher when it comes to a school of thought titled existentialism. Now, for us who are here and have never heard of the term school of thought or existentialism, a school of thought is simply a thought paradigm, or a school of thought is simply a perspective, is a way in which one views reality. There are several schools of thought, existentialism just being one of them. Another is realism or idealism or phenomenology and the rest. And existentialism generally means existence is prior to essence. Or in other words, you may say what a thing is comes after the existence of the thing. It's looking at life from the end of the human individual. What can I do? What can I become? You know, it's one can say I'm thrown into this world. I wasn't born with rules. I wasn't born with some sort of manual that I had read before coming into this world. So I am simply here, and the best I can do is to find what I am through engaging myself with commitment. Now, melancholy. Melancholy, what is melancholy? Or what is to be melancholic? Melancholic is an adjective from the word melancholy. To be melancholic is simply a psychological personality, let me say, that is characterized mostly by a tendency towards sadness or a tendency towards pessimism. Or if I was to use a figurative language, I would say it's a walk with a dark cloud constantly over your head. And that is being melancholic. Now, Soren Kierkegaard, as far as I have attempted to look onto him, he was one characterized by melancholic, persistent sadness, persistent pessimism, or persistent downcast in life. And his melancholy is justified through the experiences that he had passed through. And one being that there are some researchers or thinkers on Soren Kierkegaard would say that even his birth was accidental. Why? Because he is a child of a maid that was married by Soren Kierkegaard's father after the death of the father's first wife. So it's after the first wife of Soren Kierkegaard's father had passed away, then he had to marry the maid. And from the maid, then Soren Kierkegaard was. Literature tells us that Soren Kierkegaard was part of a family with 7 children, him being one of them. Now, another justification for melancholy is that before the age of 10 years old, Soren Kierkegaard began seeing the death of his siblings. And at the age of 21, he saw the death of 5 of his siblings and the death of his mother. Now, well, experiencing the death of a human being is by itself a shocker. But experiencing the death of your siblings and the death of your mother, that's it's another thing altogether now. So that's the second justification for his melancholy. And now the third justification for his melancholy is also the death of his father later on. And another justification is him being ridiculed by some sort of newspaper we can call today called the Corsair. There's a moment in his life whereby he entered into an exchange of opinions with a very famous satirical weekly named the Corsair, which ridiculed him or shamed him publicly. That's also another source of a tendency towards sadness. Another justification is him meeting this beautiful lady named Regina Olsen in his schooling period, if I remember correctly. And he did love Regina Olsen a lot. However, rather strangely, after Regina and Kierkegaard got engaged, sooner he broke off the engagement. Now, the particular reason for that is not known by many scholars. What we can infer simply is that he thought that his melancholy wasn't the best psychological status that he could go into a family life with. So we can say that he was bold enough to know a problem in his life, but also bold enough to act in the best possible way. And I think it's something we can learn today, that even if a particular decision seems to be beautiful from afar, it's good to bring it closer and reflect upon it and see whether it's possible that such a beauty could be manifested in the context of my very own life. And if such beauty cannot be manifested in the context of my very own life, then it's best to simply be courageous enough and say, no, I will not do this, even if it might be very tough to swallow such a situation. And indeed, it was very tough for Soren Kierkegaard. And the final justification for his melancholy, something I would rather call a measure, was his conflict with the Danish Lutheran Church. His conflict with the Danish Lutheran Church. Now, basically, the conflict was centered on Kierkegaard's understanding that with the economical revolution that was happening by then in Copenhagen, and the possible unification of such an economic revolution with the church, what was going to be produced out of that synthesis between the secularized economic revolution and the faith or the church in Denmark was that at the end of the day we will have a church that is secularized. And there is a point in his journals where he mentions that what he perceives of the Danish church is really that which Christ came to abolish. Now, that's a very strong statement given against an institution that had grounded itself in that period. Now, some thinkers say that that made him discommunicated from the church, but the discommunication never caused an altogether relegation of Soren Kierkegaard from his attachment to his faith. So he moved on to seek for an independent foundation for religion. Some people say that Kierkegaard is associated with a religious school of thought known as fideism, whereby there's a belief that we can access God through faith alone. And it makes sense, knowing that in Copenhagen by then, they were holding a Lutheran sort of doctrine. You remember the five solas held by Martin Luther, one of them being sola fide. Right. Now, after the aftermath of the separation between Kierkegaard and the church, Kierkegaard persisted in his search for an authentic understanding of what religion simply means and what faith really meant for himself. So he's an advocate of an individual flexing his muscle into understanding of anything, including faith itself. Now it is from that line of thought where we have the so-called spheres of existence by Soren Kierkegaard. If you remember, the aesthetic sphere, the ethical sphere, and the religious sphere of human existence. Soren Kierkegaard made his point to establish an independent foundation for religion, a foundation that in its essence did not depend on ethics. And by ethics now, I mean the societally accepted mode of conduct. The societally accepted mode of conduct. It's a mode of conduct that aims at emulating the values of a society. And when I speak of values, moral values in this sense, I mean the irreducible elements of a society's ideal type, if I may borrow words from Max Weber. In any society, you would find an ideal type. When I say ideal type, I mean that which the society understands to be the best possible society. Now, the best possible society must have its elements. So, if you analyze that ideal type, you'll find irreducible elements we call values, you see. Now, ethics in this regard means an individual's adherence to that which the society understands to be the best possible way of living. And when I speak of religion, I mean superseding, I mean moving beyond the requirements of a society into a union with the absolute. Now, I would have to read here a couple of things as I enter into the second part of the title, which is the core part, religion as a teleological suspension of ethics. I'll start by saying, the best place to start is by asking whether embarking on religious fear implies the teleological suspension of the ethical. An individual living by ethics adheres to the universal. Now these are thoughts by Kierkegaard here. He's saying that when you speak of one being ethical, it means you are in line with the universal. And by universal here, we must understand it to be in line with that which all members of a society subscribe to. For one to be identified as being ethical, more often than not, he or she must be exhibiting a manner of conduct that is recognized as acceptable by the society. individual particularity prioritized above social universality in this regard, in the ethical domain, is unacceptable. On this point is where the paradoxicality of religion emerges. The religious sphere of existence is founded on the acceptance of the supposition that the individual is superior to the universal. There are instances in which the religious seems utterly opposed to the demands of the natural and the social. Now, in order to explain this point of view, Kierkegaard makes use of the Abraham, Isaac, biblical historical account, the Genesis 22 account, if you remember that, whereby God ordered Abraham to go forth with Isaac on Mount Moriah so that Abraham could sacrifice Isaac, and as an act of obedience to God. So Soren Kierkegaard brings this forth to say that, when we look at this example, what is ethically expected of Abraham as a father is to love his child so much that Abraham can do anything for the child. But that is not what Abraham does here. Abraham chooses to do that which is not societally perceived as an act linked to values, or as an act linked to the society's ideal type. Abraham identifies, in the ethical domain, Abraham would identify himself as with a fatherly duty to love his son more than he loves himself. This is what is expected both naturally and societally of a father. This, however, is not what Abraham does, or at least willing to do. Instead, he does that which is against the naturally and socially expected. That is, he chooses to proceed with an attempted, some may call child sacrifice, attempted. So, according to Kierkegaard, he says that looking at this scenario from the ethical perspective, there are a couple of offenses that Abraham performs here against the ethical domain. One, Abraham standing against what is universally expected of him. Two, demonstrating that the individual is above the universal, that you are now above what is expected of you. Three, that Abraham presents himself as immediately present to God, the absolute. And four, the failure to explain his deeds, since the language through which he could communicate his deeds to the masses is absent. Kierkegaard does not leave it at that. He moves forward to comparing Abraham, who he regards as a knight of faith. Knight meaning knight spelled as K-N-I-G-H-T. Knight of faith, comparing a knight of faith to a tragic hero. He's doing this because he's willing to go further, to try to understand Abraham. Why would you do something like this? He says that the difference between a hero and a knight of faith, even at times where the hero might seem to be doing something which is ethically unaccepted, is that the hero persists in the domain of the universal. A hero may say, I'm willing to sacrifice my wife, but I'm willing to sacrifice my wife because of the betterment of the society. And the society would acknowledge that and accept that. And that is why we would applaud such an activity done by a hero. However, a knight of faith is not a tragic hero. A knight of faith is beyond the ethical domain. But Kierkegaard mentions a very important point here. He says that by saying that the by saying that embarking on the religious sphere is a suspension of the telos of the ethical. He does not mean that the two are antagonistic. He does not mean that the two are opposites, direct opposites. Rather, he said, the teleological suspension of the ethical should not be understood as an enmity against the constructive spirit of the ethical. The religious transcendence beyond the ethical should rather be understood as moral demands taking on a different approach within the religious sphere. Instead of the single individual relating to the absolute through the universal, the religious sphere turns it around. Rather now, the single individual relates to the universal through the absolute. The shift of approach gives the absolute superiority above the universal, and rightly so. So how then does the religious individual live after the teleological suspension of the ethical? Kierkegaard says that he or she lives in the absurd. He or she lives simply by a faith towards the absolute. Now, what is my main point? Or what is the one single issue that led me to bringing this forth? Or led me to bring this topic forth is this. If we have understood each other to this moment, if at all religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical. By the way, when I say teleological suspension of the ethical, this is what I mean. Kierkegaard says that the end of an ethical living is within the ethical, not outside. But an individual who has chosen to live in the religious sort of removes that end and establishes another end, which is within the absolute. Now, what is the great danger here of accepting that religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical? The great danger is that there is now an opening of a door that may be very tough to close. If today you tell me that I can be religious, even at times when I am against what the society expects of me, then either knowingly or unknowingly, you have opened a door towards the difficulty of differentiating between divine illumination and a psychological tendency. Kwamba, can I speak in Hebrew? Kwamba utatofautishaje sasa na msaada wa kimungu, nuru ya kimungu katika utendaji wako na michezo ya kisaikolojia tu ambayo inatokea kwenye akili yako? Is there a line to differentiate between the two? By accepting that religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical, we also have to come to a point of dealing with what we call fundamentalism and fanaticism. How can we deal with these issues? Now, as a starting point now of our discussion here, let me read to you something short that was written by a brilliant thinker named Evans, who wrote a recent introduction to Kierkegaard's text known as Fear and Trembling. His Fear and Trembling. Fear and Trembling. So he says this, Evans says this: Among these questions, some of the most pressing concern the relative value and danger of religious devotion as a source of action. Fear and trembling shows a clear awareness that the story about Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac is in many ways a dangerous narrative. We live in a world where religious fundamentalists try to justify violence against innocent people by appealing to what they perceive as God's commandments. Deranged parents sometimes kill their children in the belief that they have been commanded by God to do so. Fear and trembling rightly worries about people who may respond to the story in their kinds of ways, asking whether one should dare think about the Abraham story. Can one then speak candidly about Abraham without running the risk that an individual in mental confusion might go and do likewise? Religious faith seems then, to some people, to be too dangerous to tolerate. Something that leads to war, terrorism, fanaticism. We can see this in John Lennon's famous line in his song named Imagine, where he dreams of a world where there is no heaven, no religion too. Though Fear and Trembling shows a deep understanding of this kind of worry about religious faith, it also tries to show, meaning Kierkegaard also tries to show, that to lose the possibility of genuine faith is to lose something of incalculable value. To eliminate faith in order to eliminate fanaticism is to defy the established social-political order. Such a secularized society might eliminate fanatics, of course, but it would also eliminate such figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., who mounted a serious religious critique of the established order. Most importantly to Kierkegaard, such a secularized society that has done away with faith would remove any transcendent meaning that gives the lives of individual human depth and value. You hear what he's trying to say here? You might be thinking that by the removal of faith, your soul is on there. But at the same time, you might be inputting a greater danger. Now, coming to the life we live in today. From now on, we see people, we see religious leaders in different domains or in different denominations, you may say, performing acts that one religious leader might perceive to be nonsensical. Inakuwaje hawa waamini wanaruhusu huyu kiongozi wao wa kidini awafanye wamwagiwe mafuta ya chakula katika nyuso zao? Huu ni ujinga huu. Na mwingine atakuja atasema, inakuwaje hawa wanatoa pesa nyingi kiasi hiki kwa ajili ya huyu jamaa? Hawafikiri haya mambo. Sasa, at the end of the day, we have leaders, religious leaders, who are simply criticizing each other. But I think criticizing each other is not the solution. Or saying that mbona hutumia akili is not the solution. I think the solution would arise if and only if we come to the acknowledgement of the acceptance of the proposition that religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical. Knowingly or unknowingly, for one to engage in such acts, he or she has already accepted the msemo wa kwamba ya binadamu sio ya Mungu, ya kwamba Mungu si binadamu, ya kwamba kuna namna akili ya binadamu inaweza isielewe, lakini kwa Mungu vinaeleweka. Sasa ukishakubali assertion hiyo, ni kukubali kwa assertion hiyo ndiko ambapo kunachochea katika matukio kama haya. Kwa hiyo mimi wazo langu leo hii ni hivi: underlying all these things, regardless of the fact that they may be divinely illuminated or not divinely illuminated, I think there is a need to look at this underlying supposition. Why? Because there is a need to understand. Hivi kuna mwisho wa matumizi ya akili ya binadamu ambapo baada ya hapo basi ni kuamini tu? Na mwisho huo ni upi? Na je, ni muhimu kufahamu? Na je, tunaweza tukafahamu education kama kweli iko? So nikasema basi ngoja nilete hili mezani. I don't have answers. If I had answers, it wouldn't have been a problem. So it's a thing that I'm bringing to the table for the members of the discussion to think about, and for anyone out there to also think about. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for a wonderful, provoking kind of introduction into this topic that calls reflection. It's time now that we dive into the reflections as invited. Maybe I can start. I was almost subscribing to the topic as an assertion for myself that, of course, religion is a teleological suspension of ethics or of the ethical. From the way you define what is ethics, what is ethical, which is agreed upon by the universe, the society, to be good, like that. And again, religion as kind of going beyond the requirements of society or the expectations of society, that which is calling you to go beyond that. And so if, of course, we can dare to go beyond the expectations of society for the sake of the absolute, we are suspending ethics in that sense. But again, my problem comes with what is religion again. From the etymology of religion, the basic etymology I like is that religion comes from the Latin word religare. That's one I like this. I like most that to rejoin, ligaments, ligare. You get ligaments. They like to bond again, to rebond the bonds, the ligaments, the link. So religion as something that reunites you. So if religion, for example, the Christian religion is meant to, if it's religion, it's uniting us, uniting the Christian faithful to the absolute. It rebinds them. It rebinds. That's the Melancholic religion. To rebind, to reconnect. But now, if religion, for the sake of religion, you are going beyond, or you are denying what the structure that is, thinking you are throwing apart the absolute, the social norm. That then brings to the problem of evil. I don't know how we're going to correct this, but evil, as you know, the etymology of evil again is the evil one is that one is the one who throws apart, who diaboling, to throw apart. Then you have the etymology of evil, of evil, of Satan, the one who throws apart, throw apart. So now, maybe we see, because this religion was kind of, for Kierkegaard, it seems to be kind of subjective, that for the way I understand the absolute to be, it seems the absolute could be interested in things beyond society. So, and I'm the one interpreting that. So if I'm the one interpreting that, I don't care what others say, I care for what I think is true. That is right. So, then religion is problematic here in the sense that do you mean the kind of religion that is not structured? Because we have structured religions. Structured in the sense that, of course, there are institutes, of course, I'm talking about institutes now, the institutes of religion, which are carrying out that job of that activity of religion. But now, it seems here for Kierkegaard, he's not talking about structured religion. It is not for structured religion, for institutional religion. It is on the side of the kind of subjective religion, which I think is true, which I think is okay, is that which I go, and I don't care what the society expects of me, what the society will condemn or judge me. I do what I think is right. So I think I also hesitating to conclude, because as I said, I had almost the conclusion that's okay, but when it comes to the sin, religion needs a definition. If religion is to reconnect you, then connect you with God. It seems God, if the best way I would think here is that kind of religion that is not apart from the divine. It's both social norm and also agreed upon, must be of the divine, also the absolute liking also. So it's both. So what is the absolute kind of side liking, or that one also must be also, okay, we can take that as part A of the absolute, but also that of society as part B. And then religion should be kind of way that links these two, not only the A, but both A and B. Now, so maybe we can keep reflecting on that. I think it makes sense. Now, you can say something before we welcome him again.
Shortly. I think for anybody who would have an opportunity to read Kierkegaard, you would understand one thing for sure, that he is an advocate for the thought that if you claim to be religious, if you claim to believe something, be willing to die for it. Do not let the fact that you are a member of a particular religious institution define the health of your state of connection between you and God. You can be in a church, you can be in a mosque, you can be in a temple for so many years, yet you're empty. And even his fight against the Danish church was that he perceived it to be heading towards a corruption, political corruption. And he was standing there as a gadfly, like Socrates at his time, to tell people, hey, there's something more meaningful here that we are heading to lose. Stand. Seek for God. Seek for Him by yourself. If at all you have a church, a society around you, make sure that which you are willing to subscribe yourself to doesn't corrupt the authentic journey of a human individual towards God. I think that's the short.
Okay, anyway, we can come back to that again and again. Anyone else? Friends? One? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kashumba, for the nice introduction. I think the idea of the SOREN KIERKEGAARD is connected much to his experience. And probably what led him to that is his conflict with the Danish church that by the time was been taking us through the history. But I also see one danger with this. If religion is to go beyond the universal, I see the danger of relativism. I see the danger of relativism. So it means that whatever way I take is correct. And if I read the Fides et Ratio by St. John Paul II, saying that once we have started to advocate for relativism, then there is no truth, all are just opinions. So you explained that one nature, but I contribute this one. Relativism also is going to take place. And I don't think if we can define religion in relativistic sense, then it can remain to be religion at least to the way many people understand religion. So this is my contribution.
No, it's a valuable contribution. But if you recall the issue I brought forth here, because you're mentioning that there is a danger of relativism, isn't it? And that danger comes from accepting religion's suspension of the telos of the ethical, isn't it? But then, if we are against the danger you mentioned, in order to deal with this danger and many other dangers, shouldn't we accept that religion is not a teleological suspension of the ethical? Shouldn't we accept that then? Now, if we accept that religion is not a teleological suspension of the ethical, which means now we are saying to be religious is to be ethical. And to be ethical is to be religious, possibly. Now, if that is the case, then what's the place for faith? Because as Kierkegaard says, because we're dealing with Kierkegaard here, we're trying to analyze him, he says that where there is no risk, there is no possibility of faith. Yani pale ambapo yani unawakika kabisa, yani hauna na chembe unaweza kucheza, una chembe cha kuone usikie chochote kile. Why are you speaking of faith? You understand? So haya yote relativism and fanaticism and all these dangers, fundamentalism, all these dangers, they are founded by the exception of the assertion that religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical. And we see this happening existentially.
But that
so how do we deal with that?
Is religion according to SOREN KIERKEGAARD?
Right. No, the point I'm making is this. Are there times today whereby we tend to perform things that might seem awkward or unethical in society in the name of God? Do we do that?
Yes, we do.
Do we do that?
Yes.
If we do that, isn't that a subscription to the assertion that religion is a teleological suspension of the ethical?
Of course it is.
If it is a subscription, if it is an affirmation of that assertion, it's until we deal with that assertion, it's when we can solve these problems.
And okay. I will come to okay.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When we are speaking about the sphere of existence,
Now,
we like man to speak about these three spheres, that UNESCO sphere and the religious sphere. And you said that in UNESCO that the moral conduct of the society.
Right.
And in religious society, we go beyond the requirement of the society, then we come to the specific spiritual something.
Yeah, so religion, when I say religion, this, as you say, joining with the absolute. Yeah. Sometimes even at the cost of going against the ethical. In fact, a person in the religious sphere perceives the ethical as a temptation to go against God's will.
Now my question is, we will still point the point of fatalism, but we go God's true face, and then we come to the point now of you speak about the person will become fanatic. Now, my point is now, what will make a society or a person now to be in a balanced mode? Because once I come to this point that religion is a theological separation of faces. Now, when you find a person who doesn't religion, then fideism goes to the person who becomes fanatic.
You
so
see,
what is now we come to the balance mode. The one that balance mode.
Do you see the agony? Do you see the agony you're facing, brother? That is the same agony I'm facing. And that is why I say that I'm not here to offer a solution. I'm here to point out some assumptions we usually make without spending time to think about them. And because you're not spending time to think about these assumptions, we tend to simply blame shift. Yule afanye kitu sahihi, yule afanye kitu sahihi, yule afanye kitu sahihi. We're not solving anything. It's until we solve this issue and you are questing for a balance, isn't it? I posed the same question. Is there a balance? Is there a demarcation mark? I don't know. I'm simply a person who has uprooted this without a solution. So I don't know.
If we allow this kind of capitalism, can we go forth with the standard that we don't have a clue of what true religion is? Can it be right?
I think a human, at least there's one case of a human being, which is me. I want to be comfortable with having stuff just randomly being present. I would want answers, and that is why I put this question here. What is the meaning then of true religion?
Okay, thank you. I think it's good if we can make some assumptions into this conclusion, this question that perhaps solves to not leave it open-ended. And I would like to try to bring about this balance. You see, I talked of these two paths, the path to the absolute, the religious one, and the path of the universal, like that of society, the ethical one, like A and B. And this is what we call religion, this part A of the path to the absolute. Where the one then you link yourself to the divine, the absolute, even at the cost of being against the society, being the universal, the expected norms and what have you. But I think we have many people in society who practice religion, but again they do things which everyone can say, then if what's the value of religion, going to church every Sunday and you do such a thing to your father, to your mom, to your daughter, to your close neighbor like that, then I doubt if this man, for example, tries to do things because we do evil at the cost at the name of God also sometimes. Now I think my proposition here is that perhaps we should redefine religion in this sense that a religion is that which binds you both ends, something not only binds you to the divine, but also binds you to society, both ends. So it's both end and again to be to God. If that is kind of C or the universal, then AC, BC should be correct, not only AC, because God, human eye to God is that is religion, also according to Judaism also. Then I think what we can balance religion here is that if I am a religious person, I should always stick a balance. Even if society is wrong in its assumptions, and I know the religious one is right, I should find a way to help, to be, not only to leave society, like diabolic, throwing apart society and kind of find my own way, but still be in society. Find a way to be part of the society as Jesus made it. Jesus lived as a Jew, a pious Jew for 30 years, knowing the wrongs of Jewish religion even before coming. He knew the flaws of the Jewish religion, the practices of the Pharisees, but he was ready to be taught by Pharisees for 30 years. So I think it's okay. We know the religious societies may be wrong here, and I know I have to do something even beyond society. But don't throw away society. It's a good place to begin. So stay there first. Then from there, build from society to the divine, not from something separate. So maybe that one can solve to link the two, and that way will change many, because people in society will first know you as one of them, but again they see you doing things that are going beyond the expectation. I think Abraham was not only throwing apart the expectations of society, but was building upon the expectations of society. He was first of all a man of his land, just like anyone, practicing faith to God, first of all, like that. Then from there, anyone in the society, in Abrahamic society, would hear the voice of God, let's assume, and do what is right. Then it's okay. Everybody hears it. But for me, I've heard the voice of God, not sacrificing the animal by my son, Isaac, the sake of Abraham. Then it's okay. As a Jew, I keep that assumption. Then I am not throwing away the Jewish assumptions of who is ethical, but I'm building upon. Maybe you change the language, not only going something like you do away with society, not doing away, but building on. That's it.
Okay. Something I can say a little. One is at least the contribution, and the other the question. First, I think Kierkegaard, he criticized this authorizing religious institutions. But I think the point here, what he himself emphasized, which could be a question to us whether we can move with it or we can really fulfill it or what. I think Christianity by itself, it needs, or it demands one to have this kind of extreme fidelity to the practices themselves, the sacraments, the rules themselves. They need every point of this extreme fidelity to be faithful to the point that sometimes you can think that this is
absurd. Commitment to the absurd.
But also the question which I wanted to ask you, Emmanuel, it is concerning these three stages of when he moves from one stage to other, he excludes one stage that once you are being you are now ethical, then forget everything about the you start taking. Then now your religions forget everything about from the earth. Or
Right.
what can this, is it possible that when one in is meant to have this kind of intermingles, these stages of practices that one, because I read at a certain point, a certain line, in a certain book, I don't know, I remember the author, but he also is a scholar of these German topics. He mentioned that what Kierkegaard emphasized in his religious states, that one practices the religion, while at the same time have this does not exclude his nature.
Right. Let me start from there. You practice religion, it doesn't mean you are not human. You are human. Now let me answer your initial question about the 3 stages. Well, before I, to some level, fixed my attention in reading Kierkegaard, I had made an assumption that when he spoke of the 3 stages, it means that he was speaking of stages that human beings generally go through, you know. But again, after reading several texts concerning Kierkegaard's idea of this aesthetic and ethical and religious, we get to understand that there are thinkers who say that Kierkegaard was not establishing some sort of psychological understanding of how a human being lives, whereby if you are a child, you are attached to the aesthetic, you are attached to things you see, things you touch and all that. And then after that, you develop a conduct, some years for yourself. Then after that, you might begin starting to ask questions concerning faith. No, that was not Kierkegaard's central aim with these 3 so-called stages. He was not performing a psychological analysis of life. There are thinkers that say that what he was performing is to give us 3 possible ways in which a human being could live. 3 possible ways in which a human being could live. 1, the aesthetic way, or the aesthetic domain or sphere of human existence. Now, in this sphere, an individual is that which is fragmented. You are being tossed to and fro by vionjo, when into a condition of vionjo. That is being aesthetical. And then, if you speak of the ethical, now this is the defragmentation of the individual. In the sense that it's no longer I am being divided among my numerous ones. Rather now I've decided to be committed to this one way of living. I don't care about the rest. And then the religious would be, okay, I've committed myself to this day, to this mode of living. Is there anything beyond that? Is there a call to attach oneself to anything beyond that? That's the religious now. So there are also thinkers that say that si kwamba ni stage moja kumaliza hii na nyingine, hakuna. You can be in one stage and never go to the. You can be in aesthetic stage and never go to the ethical. Or your whole life. Why? Because Kierkegaard says that the movement from one to another requires inwardness, requires an attitude of commitment and utter responsibility. However, there are also those that say that he was performing a dialectical movement from aesthetic to the religious stage, looking at his life. There's a point in Kierkegaard's life whereby he was a man of aesthetic. He was a man of parties. He was the soul of the party. He lived a lavish life. There was a point in life. And then, following that, within the same point, he meets Regina also. He falls in love with Regina. Now, he is met with a dilemma. To go ahead to marry Regina or not to marry Regina. At any point in life whereby an individual has encountered a point of making a decision and leaving the rest, or making one choice and leaving the rest to Kierkegaard, that is, that individual is in the verge of moving from the aesthetic to the ethical, which is presented by the commitment to choice itself. And then from there, no, Kierkegaard made a choice not to marry Regina, rather embark in a life of solitude, embark in a life of individuality, a life of seeking for the absurd, seeking for that you're not even sure you're going to have. And that is why he speaks of the leap of faith. That life lived in its most excellent way, in its most authentic way, is a life lived in the absurd, is a life lived in the paradoxical, is a life lived by sheer faith in Him you have never seen, the absolute. So these stages, not necessarily that if you're in one, you're in the other. No, actually sometimes, as I'm saying, you can be in the ethical while some aspects of your life are still in the aesthetic. But the general idea is to understand that the human being can participate in living in any of these three spheres of human existence.
Thank you very much, Brother Emmanuel Kashumba, for the provoking kind of discussion that you posed to us to reflect. Thank you for everyone for participating. I think his comment, his contribution marks the end of our event. But again, I'd like to offer one opportunity, one chance again to the presenter. I think you are who is this SOREN KIERKEGAARD reader? I think you are a SOREN KIERKEGAARD reader currently, or I don't know for how long you have been reading Kierkegaard. But I think you have read several books of Kierkegaard, whether by himself or people write about him. But also you are lucky to be a teacher of philosophy sometimes, but also a philosopher in making. You but say, I don't know, you know by yourself. This is the question now. Well, it was not a real question, but maybe a kind of request. What's the advice that you give to Kierkegaard readers for your experience of Kierkegaard? People talking about Kierkegaard, you reading about Kierkegaard. What is your advice to Kierkegaard readers?
Thank you. My advice to Kierkegaard readers abides to what Kierkegaard advises his readers. There are several texts by SOREN Kierkegaard that we can call pseudonymous texts. These are texts where Kierkegaard does not say that he has written them. Rather, he uses false names. Texts such as either or, texts such as fear and trembling. You find that he has used names of people that are not Kierkegaard. Why? One reason is that he wants you to be an individual, to remain an individual. Don't subscribe to his ideas because you know it's him speaking. He wants you to read as though he is also part of that cycle of discussants, listening in to an old man speaking. The individual. The capacity to give a chance to somebody. The capacity to allow an individual, to allow a person to speak for himself or for herself. And I think it's an attitude that I am thankful. I have not accomplished it, but I see myself heading there. When somebody speaks, let the person speak. When somebody writes, read whatever he or she has written. Don't prematurely nullify the person because you hold views against that person. Allow yourself to see these things from different perspectives as well. possibly by doing that, you would end up in the best possible way in your quest to embrace truth. I think that's the sole advice I give to any reader of Kierkegaard. But not only any reader of Kierkegaard, but any human individual who is simply a faithful pursuer of truth. Allow you to be taught.
Thank you very much. Now, before we clap as a concluding kind of sign or signature, let's introduce ourselves by name, because we didn't do this in the beginning. Then we can conclude by thanking the brother by a clap. You can introduce yourself at least by one name or whatever you think. Then, yeah.
My name is Patrick Dominic, first year.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. And that is okay, bro. There, maybe. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm skeptic.
That's good,
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel. So thank you very much for everything.